First of all, how many US bases do we have on UK soil?
Is everybody going to be able to hear?
Oh,
is that okay? Do you want me to use this? Okay. I want to set the US bases in this. In fact, they're in England. They're not in Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland. It's just in England. But I want to set these bases in the context of the presence of the United States visiting forces worldwide. Just to say that there are about 600. I say about because, believe it or not, even the Pentagon doesn't know how many bases they have. So it's about 6,000 bases in the States. There are approximately over 1,000 bases outside the States, and in this country there are 11 bases, we think. Now these are bases like Menwith Hill. Now just to say, they are all called RAF. It's really important to understand that they are not RAF. They are occupied and controlled by the American visiting forces and their agencies. For example, Menwith Hill, which is up in Yorkshire, it's about 8 miles from where we live in North Yorkshire, is run by the National Security Agency, and the National Reconnaissance Office is there too. Very, very secretive organisations. I'll say a bit more what they do, because I think one of the questions is about that, isn't it?
Yes.
She has kindly let me have a view of the questions, so I've been able to do a little bit of homework on it, which has been interesting actually, because I've forgotten actually how they did come here. Don't call them RAF, friends. They are United States Air Force, or as in Menwith Hill, NSA, NRO, Menwith Hill, Lakenheath, Mildenhall, and I'll go through them. Feltwell, they're all called RAF. Sometimes they have an RAF commander there, and that's a deceit too, because it sounds as if they are in command of the base. They are not. There is a US commander there. We've just had a new head of station. She's called a chief of station actually at Menwith Hill. They're usually a military person, but interestingly, this person is a civilian, and it probably maybe reflects. I say there's lots of maybes in all this because it's very difficult to find out information from these very secretive and unaccountable bases that are actually out of control of the British government. So it's somebody called Natalie Lang, who's appeared at Menwith Hill, who's not military. There was a colonel there before. There's an RAF liaison officer, a RAF commander they're called, and perhaps later on in the questions I can expand a bit on how they became RAF. It was a dupe really to the British public. We'll call them RAF and then they'll think that there are bases. Not at all. They are occupied and controlled by the American visiting forces and their agencies. Feltwell is a very secretive base on the Norfolk-Suffolk border. There are about, I think there's about 5 radomes. You know what a radome is? It's a satellite dish that's covered up to look rather like a... Oh, look at that, that's brilliant. A golf ball. Another word for them is a golf ball. There are 33 radomes at Menwith Hill. And Feltwell is the deep space tracking facility and near space centre. What they do is monitor space debris, really. Very difficult to find out whether they're involved with the National Missile Defence System programme, which I'll say a bit more too about. Lakenheath, which is one of the biggest bases American bases in England, and Mildenhall just down the road, USAF Mildenhall. I can't emphasise how important it is to call them what they are. And this sort of, cover that there's an RAF commander and an RAF, he's really an RAF chief. I think they're all men actually. They're RAF liaison officers, so they're like a PR person between the British government, the MOD, and the Americans. But who is in charge are the Americans. Mildenhall, Alconbury, that's another one. In Cambridgeshire, Upward, that's another one. Cambridgeshire. Croughton. Now, Croughton is a very, very interesting base. Oh, I can make all these lovely pictures.
Oh, yeah.
See, all called RAF. Croughton, which I was there on Saturday actually, and Croughton has the largest switchboard, military switchboard, outside America. It's actually destined to become a very, very important base. They're going to spend something like $317 million, that's about 200 pounds, in a huge development of that base. They're going to close Alconbury, Upwood and Molesworth. Molesworth is another base. What I'm trying to say is that these bases are all linked. It's a big web of military might around the world, but we've got 11 here. There are other bases in this country. I mean, on RAF bases, there may well be an American presence. At Chicksands, which is in Bedfordshire, which used to be an American base and handed back to the MOD in, I think, 1995, it's now the Defence Intelligence Security Centre. There's a wonderful 12th century Gilbertine priory there. I did go onto the base and had a good look around. This is a very good way to find out actually what's going on. Unfortunately now I've got 5 injunctions on American bases. Permanent injunctions, I'm really outraged by that. But it's a wonderful, wonderful Gilbertine priory, and the Americans always treat these places very badly. Greenham Common, which is actually where I first arrived, woke up to all this. I was a midwife. I have to say that my working life has been in the health service. I was a nurse, midwife and health visitor. And going into these bases really was a good way to find out. Just wandering around, and if the Americans came along and said, "Put your hands in the air!" My name is Lindis Percy. I'm going to leave now. I'm just seeing what you're doing, and leave. And often they threw to the ground and were very nasty. But it put a stop to that, because actually if you do go on, if I do go on, I'm in contempt of court, and obviously that's a very serious step to take. I have actually been in contempt several times, and I have to say I have utter contempt for courts. So Croughton is going to be a very, very important base, and it's going to be probably like a base like as big as Menwith Hill. Surveillance and security. It's also it's connected with drones. A lot of these issues, friends, are they're issues on their own. Huge issue of drones. There's a direct connection between Djibouti in Yemen and Croughton, and also an RAF base called Marham. They're all connected and they're all taking off. Another base next to Croughton is Barford St John. That's just that's derelict at the moment, but that's set for expansion too. Fairford. Now I think Fairford's probably the nearest base to you actually. I think it probably is. That's in mothballs, that place. It was sort of activated recently because President Obama flew in there for the NATO summit in Newport. But mostly it's dead. I mean, there's a few American soldiers there and Ministry of Defence Police. I'll say a bit about Ministry of Defence Police as we go along. You must tell me how long we've got. We've only done the first. We haven't got through the first question yet, have we? And the other base is Welford, which is sort of off the A4, near to Fairford, and it's a bomb factory, a store. So that's pretty much what they are. There's a base called Morwenstow, which is run by GCHQ. Recently the NSA put in a lot of money into Morwenstow, and they're hand in glove there. Edward Snowden. Thank you so much, Edward Snowden. He's done such a service to the world, in my view. And he has revealed all these things, which we probably knew, but they're confirmed, that, all this surveillance and nothing is private. Was it Mr. Haig who said, if you've nothing to hide, you've nothing to fear? Well, the answer to that one, I think, is that there's such a thing as privacy laws. Really, really important to maintain our privacy. It's not an answer to say you've nothing to hide, you've nothing to fear. We've been working in CAB, trying to sort of look at this sort of thing and to ask questions. One of the ways we work is to ask questions in Parliament. Now, I was quite naive, really. I was brought up to believe that the Mother in Parliament told the truth, police told the truth and all that, but actually, I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked when police are lying in court. And some of the questions and the answers that come back are just pathetic, frankly. But we do have some friends in the Commons and the Lords, and work with them and asking questions and keeping going and being persistent. I always say that I don't think these bases will go in my lifetime, certainly not, but one day I hope we wake up and do things in a different way.
Okay, so you've just explained that there's always an American sort of ahead of the case. So, what jurisdiction does our UK government have, if any, over the bases? I mean, say for example, the US decided to undertake an airstrike, and our government didn't necessarily agree with that. Do we have any way that we can say no? I mean, what's the level of jurisdiction we have and oversight we have?
I think that's a really interesting question, actually, because it sounds as if we do. We're in full control. We haven't. We haven't got control of these bases. In 1993, I think it was, I was involved. I've done a lot of court work and gone up into sort of all levels of the legal system, and have done quite a lot of work in the High Court. And in one of the cases in 1993, I won't go into the case, so it was very interesting. We lost. You're going to lose, actually, when you're up against the American military, the American government, the American legal system, the British system, all the rest of it. But we went backwards and forwards to the courts. So Keir Starmer represented me. He's just stopped being DPP. It was a very good team, Keir Starmer and Mark Stevens. And we went backwards and forwards to the courts to get disclosure of documents. And one of the documents, I've only bought a few of these documents, but they're very, very interesting. They're marked secret. And this one is called, I'll read it actually because it's interesting. It's historical, rather than trying to sort of, say in my own words. But it's headed, is there any written agreement or law to control? To say that we have control. And it starts off by saying the United States government offered to send heavy bombers in Europe in June 1948. If you remember, this is a potted version of what happened in the Second World War. America came quite late to 1942, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They came in. And then at the end of the war, they did come to this country and they set up bases with the RAF, at bases like Lakenheath, Mildenhall, Alconbury, mostly in East Anglia actually. But in 1948, and this is a quote, as a political gesture and as a token of United States interest in the defence of Europe, they offered to send heavy bombers. Two of the three groups concerned came to the United Kingdom in July, and the third group, which was originally sent to Germany, was transferred to the United Kingdom later that year. We really gave the United States friends, lock, stock and barrel, these bases. There was no meaningful legal protection. They quote acts like the Visiting Forces Act, 1952, and the Status of Forces Agreement, 1951, which are very, very thin. There are all sorts of exemptions for the visiting forces. For example, and I've been at the sort of brunt of this, and we tried to take it up to Europe to challenge this certificate of immunity. Because if, for example, a member of the visiting forces is, say, does something against English law, say assaults, which has happened, and nothing happens, they take out a private prosecution, but they enter a certificate of immunity, this little bit of paper that says, if you're a member of visiting forces, you're on duty and in uniform, you're exempt from the English courts. If, say, for example, a wife or partner of an American visiting force person commits an offence, I mean, in the courts round Milden Hall, not so much now Menwith Hill, they don't seem to appear in court, but, you know, for traffic minor offences, then they're allowed to go through, but not for very serious offences. So we don't have any meaningful legal protection.
So basically, we've discussed the sort of jurisdiction that we have or don't have over these bases. What about the implications for British citizens? I mean, how do these bases affect the British taxpayer? We had the other day a US Air Force jet based at Lakenheath. It crashed 400 yards from a school. Luckily, nobody was injured. But that's the second one this year, I understand. So who is responsible for these clear-up costs? How much does it cost us as British taxpayers?
It's all very secretive when it happens, and there's a sort of countdown, and the Americans come in and they've got, you know, cordons round, and it's very difficult to find out what's going on. I mean, there's an investigation going on at the moment. But in Japan, there are 89 American bases in Japan. And on a place called, on Okinawa, there is a place called Jinwan, and an American helicopter. It's amazing in this city. It's a vibrant city. I think it's about 250,000. And the American base is right in the middle of the city, with the runway going right in the middle of the city. It's totally taken over by the Americans, and there's a lot of noise, as you can imagine. And I think it was in the, maybe the early, late 1990s, something like that. Perhaps later. But a helicopter crashed, and it crashed at the University of Jinwan University. We've got links, friends, all around the world. That's important to have links, because their struggles are our struggles. They have the same sort of struggles. They have SOFA, Status of Forces agreements, which aren't, they're meant to be sort of reviewed every so often. And we've asked questions in Parliament about that. This is going back slightly about the law. We've asked questions about that, and they say, no, it's quite all right, everything's all right, we don't need to do that. So there's a big campaign, it's been going on for a long time, to try and move the American base from this city. It's incredible that there's this American base that goes right through. It's like having a runway in the middle of Leeds or something. It's extraordinary. So there's a lot of, you ask about taxpayers, Sheila. They don't have to pay for any NHS services. They can use the services as much as they like. They go to the local schools. They say that there's always this thing about, but they bring so many jobs to the area, employment. And also it brings in a whole lot of revenue. But there was a very interesting study about Menwith Hill a couple of years ago, Joseph Rowntree funded, and they pluck out of the air that, you know, it brings in all this money, 52 million, all that. Well, how's that made up? And actually this was explored, and it was nothing like that. You know, they just sort of plucked this out of the air. And as I say, it's always difficult, because when there's a base closing, and, you know, Alkensbury's probably closing, Upward's probably closing, Molesworth, which I didn't actually mention what they do, but that's the Joint Analysis Centre, not RAF Molesworth. That was the second deployment of cruise missiles. Do you remember? Greenham being the first, Molesworth the second. I went there in about 1990, thinking that it was, you know, just closed down, and I was amazed to see that it was all, you know, lights on and very much in action. But Molesworth is probably closing and moving to Crowton. Molesworth has the Africon headquarters, Africom. America has divided the world up into sections. So there's EUSCOM, European Command, US Command, there's Specific Command, there's Africa Command, and there's 5 areas around the world. This is America's, this is what we do, this is where we control. and Molesworth is the headquarters of AFRICOM here, which is going to go to Croughton, and it's going to be very, very significant to Croughton. So there's quite a few implications, actually, for us. But I think the main thing is that we have no control of the bases.
Just discussed Molesworth, and you mentioned Menwith Hill. I mean, I was quite surprised to learn that with all this in the news about the NSA and spying, including on Merkel and things like that, I was quite interested to hear that Menwith Hill is an NSA listening station. And then I saw something about Echelon. Can you explain what Echelon is and how it's linked with Menwith Hill?
I think some people were quite surprised by the revelations of Edward Snowden. Everybody's aware of what Edward Snowden has done. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I was really pleased that Malala got it with somebody else. Lovely. But Echelon system is a system whereby I think it was in the 40s it actually started. And it's 5 countries are involved, and I'm not going to remember them all, I'm totally blank, but one is America, Britain, Australia, Canada, what's the 5th? Do you remember, Neil?
New Zealand.
Is it New Zealand? Yeah. And they had this little arrangement where they could spy on each other.
Yeah.
And it's actually comprehensive. And they could spy on anybody and tap into anybody's airborne communications. And we campaigned a lot about it, and then along comes Edward Snowden. And the extent of the spying is huge. You really, Echelon's been going on, but compared to what is happening now and the revelations of Edward Snowden is massive. We didn't realise that it was so huge. We're wondering about what else they do at Menwith Hill, because it is run by the National Security Agency, very secretive organisation, as I said. They spy. They spy on everybody. They spy on you. They spy on me. They spy on everybody. They can tap into, as I say, any airborne communication. Especially mobiles, you see. Mobiles are hopeless. They'll know where you are. If you want to sort of be somewhere, then go into an open space somewhere, not at home. And it's shocking, I find, that this is going on, and there's no accountability. We've asked many questions in Parliament about this. There's a very good MP called Tom Watson, who's very involved with Croughton and what they're doing there. But these bases are all linked. They've all got links with each other. They've got links around the world. As I say, it's a web. They're not in isolation. And it's this massive military empire that's been growing and growing and growing over the years. The other thing that Menwith Hill does is, one of the things that we do in CAB is to monitor planning offices, so that we've been monitoring Harrogate Planning Office for years. And in 1997, you can just get it online now. You just have to go into the office and look at files. And I discovered one of the files that public files, so you can have a look at it. A press release, which was tucked away in this file, not to the in the public gaze at all. And it said the Her Majesty's Government and the United States Government are pleased to announce that RAF Menwith Hill is to be the designated base for the space-based infrared system. I had a clue what that meant, so we worked with some academics, and one of the people that I rang up was Paul Rogers, who's Professor of Peace Studies at Bradford. And I said Paul, what on earth is this about? He said, I don't know, but I think it sounds like Star Wars. Do you remember Star Wars? Ronald Reagan's daft idea in the 80s, bringing pebbles, and Mrs. Thatcher was against it, actually. And I thought it had gone away, but not at all. Since 1980s, it's been, quietly growing and developing. And they have spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on the United States missile defense. Now, it's much better to call it offence, because it's an offensive system. There's not time to go into it, friends. If you want to find out about these things, some of it is on the CAB website, which is, if you've got a leaflet, it'll tell you the website. So that's another thing. But also, intelligence-led warfare. Since the first Gulf War, warfare is being conducted in space. And that's what's going on. You know, they tested out very much in the Gulf War. And now, with the use of drones, I mean, Crowton is very much involved with drones. They don't send drones off from Crowton, but you've got to have the intelligence gathering and connections to let the pilots know what to do. I mean, it's frightening stuff, it really is. And, you know, so many families who are in fear while these drones go round and round and round and gather intelligence, and they can be up for days and days and days, and they don't know whether it's going to drop. I've got a friend who was talking about her experiences when she was a child in the Second World War the other night, and she was saying about doodlebugs. If everybody remembers doodlebugs. You know, when the noise stopped, they dropped, and that was terribly frightening, and she said she was absolutely terrified. It's no different now to the families who, you know, the civilians, the innocent people who are being affected by drones. And it's a fantastic technology, and has a very positive side to it too. But actually, when they're just dropping missiles and bombs on innocent people, I mean, Neil, I expect you're going to talk about the whole muddle of Syria and all of that, so I'll leave that to you, because I can't keep up with that, frankly. Who's doing what? Who's friends with who? Who's frightened or doesn't want to, you know, be friends? Oh my goodness, it's like playground stuff if it wasn't so serious. So MENRA's got a very, very important role. Lots of things that they do there. Interestingly enough, at the beginning of the year, we heard that 500 military and civilian personnel were leaving. Very significant. It's quite quiet at the moment, this base. And also, we learnt recently, and this is, sometimes you stumble across all this. We stumbled across the fact that Crowton was going to be such an important base, just through doing research on the net and discover. Always contact journalists to say what is going on, and the Independent ran a story, Kyle Milner ran a story about it. Because that's what we need to know, friends. We need to know what's going on, what's just up the road, and what money is being spent on what, and that we have no control.
Thanks very much. Well, that's very interesting that you talk about the sort of the weaponisation of space, which is something that I think is incredibly worrying. And you're doing some sort of protest or vigil with regard to that, aren't you, Lindis? I saw that on your website.
It's another huge issue, weaponisation of space, which is the United States missile defence system. I mean, it doesn't work. I have to say, there's some very good scientists in the States who are raising the question of, but it doesn't work. Do you know what it does? It's this, it's hitting a bullet with a bullet. So you've got to say, I mean, they still talk about rogue states, so that's North Korea, China, Iran, Iraq, Russia. So they built this sort of, network of missile defence, certainly encircling Russia. I mean, that is not the way to bring peace, is it? To threaten.
To you, I mean, not only did you work in the health service, but you're promoting life. You were a midwife, and then all of this is going on, which is actually obviously destructive to life. You obviously have a lot of emphasis on peace in your work. You had a degree, didn't you, in peace studies? Where was that from? Bradford University. So it's all very interesting, and we should be promoting peace as opposed to spending all of this money on weaponry and the thought of war. And just one final question: do you think? I mean, this is probably a bit of a loaded question. But do you think that having these bases, you mentioned the link up between all of the US bases around the world, do you think that having these bases in our country makes us a target for the United States enemies? They seem to have quite a lot of enemies at the moment, and would it make us a target for those?